I've never liked the idea of secrecy. It feels unnatural. But here, at this God-forsaken facility, secrecy isn't just policy, it's life. People disappear into this place, and they're never heard from again. I work in the morgue, and my job is simple enough. Process the dead, make sure all paperwork is filled out, and never ask questions. But the facility isn't like anything I've ever seen, and I've worked in some rough places. This one? It feels different. The first time I set foot in the place, I was given a tour, a vague, hazy rundown of what was going on here. Nothing concrete. It's not like they handed me a file on the project, because there isn't one. You get to know what you need to know, and that's it. Everyone is bound to secrecy, more than just an NDA. You don't talk about anything that goes on here. You don't question anything. You just do your job and keep your mouth shut. That's how I ended up in the morgue. I never asked to work in a place like this. I mean, it wasn't the worst job. I've dealt with the corpses before. But there was something off about this place. The people who died here, they didn't die the usual way. At least, not all of them. Some just disappeared. Like the bodies came from nowhere. But the thing that bothered me the most was the fact that no one was ever allowed to leave until their contract was up. If someone died here, they were processed here. There were no exceptions. It's been a few months since I started, and I'm beginning to notice things. Small things at first, like how the bodies seem too well preserved. They shouldn't be in the state they're in after death, but they always are. Sometimes, I'll open a drawer to find someone's eyes wide open, or I'll swear I hear a faint noise, shuffling, like someone's moving inside the body bags. But I've learned to ignore it. After all, what's the point in asking questions when you're paid handsomely to stay quiet? That's what everyone else does, and it seems to work for them. But it's getting harder to ignore the things I see in the morgue. At first, I chalked it up to stress, or maybe just the isolation of the job. But there's a nagging feeling in the back of my head, like something's about to happen. Some of the staff has been acting different, too. Not that I have much time to get to know any of them, but I've noticed a few of the guys in the hallways exhausted, even more so than usual. And there's this weird itch some of them have developed, like it's spreading through the building. I'm not sure what it is, but it's like no one talks about it, yet everyone seems to know it's there. I don't want to sound paranoid, but I've been thinking more about that first body I processed. The one that came in the night before my shift started. He was a new guy, barely a week into his work here. His name wasn't on the roster, and I never found out why. There was something unsettling about the way he looked at me when I was moving him into the morgue. His eyes weren't dead like the others. They were too alive. But I didn't think too much of it then. Now, as I sort through the bodies, I can't stop thinking about it. What was so different about him? And why is it that every time I process a new body, I feel like I've seen them before? The same strange look, the same unnerving feeling. But again, I'm not supposed to ask questions. The government doesn't let us do that. Just process the bodies. Keep everything under wraps. Tomorrow's another shift, another body to handle. But there's something I can't shake. Something's wrong. The facility was built on a foundation of silence. The workers, the guards, the doctors, everyone here operated like clockwork. Each of us bound by an unspoken agreement to keep our heads down and do our jobs. I never imagined that the silence would become something suffocating. But it did. It started with the bodies. We were used to death at the morgue, of course. People came and went. Some passing due to accidents, others to natural causes. But there was something different about the bodies I was handling lately. They were too still, too unnatural. The preservation process was rigorous here, but even so, the way they were brought in seemed off. At first, I thought it was just my mind playing tricks on me. Late nights, exhaustion, it had to be that. But when I opened the drawers to process the bodies, I couldn't fight off the feeling that something wasn't right. The eyes, they were open, staring at me as though they could still see. One body, a worker named Michael who'd passed just days before, stuck in my mind more than the others. His skin was pale, almost waxy, but what unnerved me most was the slight twitch in his fingers. The way they curled ever so slightly when I moved him. It was subtle, but I saw it. And I couldn't stop looking. The body, once solid and cold, now seemed warmer. A flicker of life, or something close to it, was lingering, like a shadow clinging to its form. But I forced myself to close the drawer to walk away. Because what else could I do? What could anyone do? I was just doing my job. But the sensation didn't leave me. The next day, I opened another drawer and saw the same thing, a body twitching slightly, as though it wasn't fully gone. I told myself it was a post-mortem spasm, that it had to be, because no one could come back from the dead. The symptoms among the workers were harder to ignore. The exhaustion was obvious at first, a deep, bone-weary fatigue that no amount of rest could cure. I saw it in the staff, the doctors, and even the security personnel. They moved slower, their faces were drawn. But there was something else, too, something less noticeable, a strange itch, like something under the skin that no one could get rid of. I didn't think much of it at first. People get tired, they get restless, they get sick. But it wasn't just the exhaustion. It was as though the illness was spreading, silently, like a creeping fog that none of us could see, but all of us could feel. But nobody said anything. We kept working, kept processing, kept our heads down. I wasn't the only one who noticed the oddities in the morgue. Others had mentioned the strange bodies they'd been tasked with preparing. But when I pressed them on it, they'd brush it off, saying things like, "It's probably nothing," or "You're imagining things." I kept hearing it from everyone. There was always an excuse, always something to make it feel normal again. So I told myself it was nothing. But there was always that one look on the bodies' faces, those eyes wide open, staring at me from the drawers. A few days passed, and the situation worsened. More bodies arrived, and each one seemed stranger than the last. The staff began to thin out one by one, and I noticed something odd in the way the facility functioned. The routines changed, the guards tightened security, and the doctors pulled away, but we still kept processing the dead. The whispers grew louder, but nobody was brave enough to speak openly. Still, we worked in silence, knowing that something was festering just below the surface. I couldn't escape the feeling that we were all caught in something we didn't understand. We kept our heads down and stayed quiet, but deep down, we all knew that something was breaking. Something had already broken. The bodies started to pile up faster than we could process them. The morgue became a constant rush of work. No time for rest, no time for thought. The drawers were filled, the paperwork was filed, and yet there was still this overwhelming sense of dread hanging over everything. The longer I worked, the more I felt it. The more I felt like I was being watched. By something in the air. By something in the bodies. It was only a matter of time before the infection would show itself. We didn't know who it would touch next. But deep down, I feared it might be me. The first official sign that something had truly gone wrong came without warning. A memo slipped under the door one night from the higher-ups. It was short, blunt, and, as always, vague. Quarantine measures are to be enacted immediately. Do not discuss this outside of the facility. Follow all protocols. The air inside the facility grew heavier in response. People started to talk, but quietly behind closed doors in hushed tones. We were all bound by secrecy, but even the most disciplined of us couldn't hold back the growing panic. Workers began pulling away from their tasks. Whispers of, "It's happening here," circulating in the hallways, but no one could confirm exactly what was happening. The management told us it was all under control. They said there was a flu-like virus spreading, something contagious but harmless. We were told to keep working, to stay vigilant. But we all knew that something far darker was unfolding beneath the surface. Every day, more bodies were brought in, and the morgue became even more overwhelming. The workers I processed weren't just dying, they were changing. But it wasn't the obvious kind of change. It wasn't a transformation into something monstrous, at least not yet. It was more subtle. Their skin would turn unnaturally pale, and their features seemed to sink inwards, like they were being hollowed out from within. Sometimes I would notice their mouths slightly open, as if they were trying to speak, but no sound would come. And yet no one said anything. We just kept moving forward, kept working. I began to question whether anyone actually believed the official story anymore. How could they? The bodies were piling up, and I could feel it, deep in my gut, that something far worse than a virus was spreading through this place. That was when the first outbreak symptoms started showing up among the staff. People started to drop out of the regular shifts, tired, unable to keep up. I saw it in their eyes first. There was this empty, distant look that seemed to take hold, and their movements became stiff and lethargic. It was too noticeable at first, but then it got worse. One of the night guards, David, collapsed on his shift. I was one of the first people to reach him. When I looked at him, I saw it. His skin was clammy and his breathing was shallow. His eyes were wide open, but they were unblinking, staring straight ahead. I called for medical help, but when they arrived, they said it was just exhaustion, just another case of overwork. But I could see it. I could feel it. This wasn't exhaustion. Soon after, the rest of us were told to stay inside our designated areas, locked down. The facility's high security measures had always been intense, but now they were absolute. Nobody was allowed in or out. They started doing frequent checks on everyone, testing for any signs of illness, scanning for symptoms of what they claimed was a viral outbreak. But there were no signs in me. None. It seemed like I was fine, like I had somehow avoided whatever was spreading. At least, that's what I told myself. The tension continued to rise. I had heard rumors of employees who were starting to show signs of the illness, but no one was talking openly about it. The higher-ups did their best to keep everything contained, shutting down entire sections of the facility, sealing off areas where the infected had been. But it wasn't enough to quell the panic. Every moment in the facility felt like I was just waiting for it to all collapse. The walls closed in tighter with each passing day. I began to hear things in the morgue, things I couldn't explain. Small noises like metal scraping against metal. At first I thought it was just the building settling, but the sounds were different. It was as if something, or someone, was moving inside the drawers, trying to get out. I'd catch glimpses of shadows passing by the morgue door when no one was supposed to be there. I would open a drawer to find a body that had shifted slightly, its limbs now arranged in a different position, like someone had been trying to escape. But no one could explain it. Nobody could offer any answers. I wanted to leave. I wanted to run away and forget all of it, but I couldn't. I was trapped, just like everyone else. As the days passed, we were told repeatedly that everything was under control. The outbreak was contained. We were given briefings that didn't explain anything, just told to stay in our designated areas and keep working. I wanted to believe them, but in the back of my mind, I knew it was a lie. I was starting to see things, hear things. In the morgue, I would sometimes find my thoughts drifting back to that first body, the one that had moved ever so slightly, the one that had made me stop and stare even when I knew I shouldn't. Was it possible that the bodies were coming back to life? Was it even possible that the experiment, the one we had all been kept in the dark about, had failed and we were now witnessing the consequences? I didn't know. I didn't have any answers. But the itch in my head, that little voice that whispered constantly in the back of my mind, was growing louder. And the more I tried to ignore it, the more it ate at me. It was only a matter of time before the whole thing unraveled. I couldn't stop wondering who would be next. The air in the morgue had changed. What had once been a quiet, sterile room now felt suffocating, oppressive. Every drawer felt heavier, the bodies inside them shifting in subtle ways that no one had acknowledged before. I couldn't ignore it any longer. These weren't just corpses, they were something else. Something that should have stayed dead. The first time I really understood this wasn't when I saw a body twitch. That had happened already, more times than I wanted to admit. No, it wasn't the twitching that made me realize. It was when I found one of the bodies, an older man, someone I'd worked with just days before, sitting up. I wasn't hallucinating. I wasn't exhausted. It was real. The body had somehow moved. I opened the drawer, and there it was, the stiff, lifeless body of someone I knew, now sitting upright. His mouth hung open, a grotesque gape, but there was no air passing through. His eyes were wide, fixed on nothing, but they weren't dead. They looked alive, and that's when the realization hit me hard in the chest. These were zombies, or something like them. I thought maybe I had missed something. Maybe the body had been moved somehow, but no. When I looked closer, I saw it. The skin was stretched and taut. But beneath it, there was something wrong. His chest barely rose, but I could hear a faint rasping sound, like a dry breath, coming from his throat. It wasn't the sound of life. It was the sound of something trapped inside, desperate to escape. I slammed the drawer shut in a panic. This wasn't normal. The facility was hiding something. I couldn't ignore it any longer. These people, these workers, were turning into something monstrous, something that shouldn't exist. And they weren't just moving in their drawers, they were coming back. I didn't report it. I couldn't bring myself to, because even if I told someone, even if I screamed it from the rooftops, who would believe me? Who would understand? The higher-ups had already started tightening the facility's security, sealing off entire sections, restricting our movements. They were containing something. And I knew it wasn't just an outbreak anymore. This was an experiment gone wrong. They had created something, and now it was alive, and it wasn't stopping. The bodies were all the same. They moved. But they didn't look like people anymore. They looked like husks. The skin had turned an unnatural shade, pulled tight over their bones. Their eyes had that vacant stare, but there was something behind them, something dark and hungry. These were no longer the people they had once been. But what terrified me most was how I couldn't get out of my head the thought that I wasn't safe. That if the virus, if whatever it was, could turn them into this, then what was stopping it from getting to me? I had to leave. But how could I leave? How could I escape when I was already so deep in this web? The workers who had died, the ones I had known, the ones I had spoken to just days ago, they were no longer themselves. They were something new, something dangerous. And it wasn't just them. It was the infection. It was spreading. I could feel it in the air. It was crawling underneath my skin, even though I hadn't felt anything physical yet. I thought I had control over the situation. I thought I could manage it. But with each passing moment, the horror only escalated. The bodies kept moving, each one more lifelike than the last. But worse, they didn't stay dead. I began to hear the sounds in the morgue, shuffling footsteps, dragging, scratching noises. But when I turned around to look, no one was there. The drawers would creak open on their own, and I swear, I could hear the bodies whispering in some unnatural way. One night, as I was finishing up, I saw it. A body, one of the newly arrived ones, had begun to sit up. Its hands, pale and stiff, gripped the sides of the drawer, and with a jarring, unnatural motion, the thing began to pull itself up. The sound was sickening, the muscles in its back pulling in ways they shouldn't. Its head turned toward me slowly, and though its eyes were empty, they focused on me as though it recognized me, as though it was waiting for me. I couldn't tear my eyes away from what had once been a person, now a twisted version of the life it once had. The creature, the thing, groaned, its body jerking with each movement. I couldn't process what I was seeing. I couldn't understand how this was happening. And then I saw the others. More bodies, more lifeless shells now sitting up, eyes snapping open. They were all looking at me. They were all waiting for something, maybe for me to join them. I backed away slowly, my chest tight with fear. This wasn't just a containment issue anymore. This was an outbreak. The infected were no longer just sick. They were turning. The virus, or whatever it was, had changed them, turned them into monsters. And now they were coming for me. I had to get out, but I was trapped. The facility had become a cage. I had spent hours trying to figure out how I could leave. The facility had become a nightmare. Once, it was just a place of routine where I processed bodies and followed orders. But now, with the outbreak spreading and the facility in chaos, it felt like a prison. I had to get out, but escaping wasn't easy. This wasn't a typical government facility. It was high security, airtight. Every exit was monitored, locked down, and designed to keep people in. But there was one thing that the government hadn't counted on: desperation. For days, I had been watching the guards, studying their patterns. I knew the shifts by heart, the rounds, the timing of the brief lulls in their vigilance, the times when the surveillance cameras were less attentive, when the security systems went into temporary lockout mode during routine checks. It wasn't much, but it was enough. I'd learned to keep a low profile, blend into the background. As long as I didn't draw attention, I could move about the facility without raising suspicion. But things had changed. The infected bodies, the sounds, the shifting in the morgue, it was all becoming too much. The guards were on edge, but they were still predictable. They still stuck to their routine, and that's when I saw an opening. The way out wasn't obvious. It wasn't as simple as walking out a door. No, I had to think through this. This was a high-security facility, a place where they had anticipated every possible scenario, from escape attempts to data leaks. Everything was monitored. Every exit was locked down with a series of complex security protocols, biometric scanners, and retinal scans. But the key to any escape is finding the holes in the system, the gaps no one thought of. I knew the main entrance was locked tighter than a vault, and I wasn't stupid enough to try it. But there were other access points, ones that weren't guarded as heavily. The loading docks. I'd seen them before, tucked away on the side of the facility, hidden behind layers of concrete. At first, I thought it was a dead end. But then I realized the workers who had been brought in, those who were supposed to be part of the containment effort, had been transported in through those docks. There was a chance, a slim one, but a chance nonetheless. I had to get to those docks. I spent the next few hours preparing, I grabbed a guard's uniform from the locker room, making sure to leave nothing behind that would make it obvious I wasn't supposed to be there. I memorized the pattern of the guards who had been walking through the halls, where they were posted, when they would leave for breaks, and when the rooms would be empty. I had seen enough to understand the system. There were blind spots in the security system. Places the guards didn't cover as thoroughly. Places where the cameras didn't reach. I would have to rely on those gaps. The hardest part was the airlock, a massive set of reinforced doors that separated the facility's core from the external environment. It was designed to be impenetrable, meant to seal the building off completely in case of an outbreak or contamination. Getting past that wasn't going to be easy. But I had a plan. I had seen the technician who worked the airlock. His routine was predictable. Every day at 2 a.m., he'd take a short break, just long enough for me to slip into the maintenance room and disable the security override for the door. I checked my watch. The time was nearing. The facility was eerily quiet. Too quiet, considering the chaos that had been bubbling beneath the surface. The infected bodies, still trapped in the morgue, weren't moving anymore. But I still had thoughts that they were waiting, watching, just beyond the door. I crept through the corridors. Every step seemed to echo in my ears. The guards were oblivious, the conversations muffled behind thick metal doors. I had learned to move swiftly, to stay out of sight, and I relied on the moments when their attention was diverted, brief flashes of time when the doors were unmanned. Finally, I reached the maintenance room. The technician was sitting in a chair, his head tilted back, eyes half-lidded. I took a deep breath and approached him. My hand hovered over his shoulder. I could feel the sweat dripping down my back. If I was caught now, it would be over. I nudged him gently, but he didn't stir. His eyes remained shut. I didn't wait. Quickly, I disabled the security system with the override code I had memorized. The airlock door creaked and groaned as it began to retract, and I slipped through into the loading dock area. I couldn't relax yet. I still had to make it out. I wasn't safe yet. The loading dock was isolated, and the trucks that came in were never closely monitored. I could hear the hum of the engines from outside, the rumble of vehicles coming in from the far end of the yard. I only had a small window of time to move, but it was enough. I hid behind one of the trucks as it began to pull in, and when the driver disembarked, I made my move. I slipped into the shadows, my breath shallow, moving as quietly as possible. The night air felt foreign, too fresh, too open after the sterile, controlled environment of the facility. I knew I couldn't look back. I had to keep moving, keep running. I thought I was home free when I stepped out of the shadows and into the open yard. But then I heard it. The familiar sound of the alarm blaring, signaling that the lockdown had been triggered. I didn't have time to think. I didn't have time to worry. The gate was just ahead. I sprinted toward it, the sound of my own footsteps mixing with the chaos in the background. I reached the gate, the cold metal rattling as I forced it open, slipping through just as the first of the guards came running into view. I had done it. I had escaped. I made it out. The thought was strangely comforting as I ran away, the walls growing smaller in the distance. For the first time in what felt like forever, I could breathe. The air was thick with the city's usual hum, but it didn't feel stifling. I wasn't being watched anymore. There was nothing but open space and the quiet normalcy of the streets. At first, it felt like nothing had changed. I slipped into the old routine: work, rest, food, sleep. Days passed, each one blending into the next. I tried not to think about what I'd left behind, about the things I'd seen. The infection, the bodies, the fear that had clawed at the edges of my mind. I told myself it was all behind me. It was over. But as the days wore on, something in the back of my head kept nagging at me. The quiet wasn't the same anymore. It was like the world was holding its breath, like the ground beneath me wasn't as solid as it once was. I told myself I was just being paranoid. The facility was behind me. The outbreak had been contained, right? I had seen the reports. Everything was under control. No more infected bodies. No more whispers of sickness. And yet the feeling lingered, like a shadow that refused to leave. I kept pushing it away. I was free. I had escaped. That should have been enough. But lately I've been real itchy.